it's a lonely place to be as a business owner, right? And it's always tough because it's oftentimes tough to find that community in order to like just sort of talk to people, throw ideas out, complain.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. My name is Brett Gilliland. I'll be your host for this episode, and I'm joined by Stefan Hankin. Stefan is the founder and president of a company called Trendency. They are a research firm. They help all sorts of organizations get really clear insights into the people that they care about, whether that's their community, their customers, their fans, their whoever. They understand how to get in there, get the research done, and pull the insights out, the real information that you need from those groups of people that you care about. So let me welcome Stefan to the show. Glad you're here. Thanks, Stefan, for joining me.
Thanks for having me here. Great to be here.
All right, so I gave a brief introduction, very brief introduction of Trendency. Why don't you give us a little more color about what you guys focus on, who you serve? Let's just use that as some context before we jump into our conversation today.
Sure, sounds good. The short-ish version of the who we are is, we're a market research company that's changing the way that our clients are understanding and engaging with their audience members. And like you said, that can be anything. It can be your customers, members of your organization, fans of your team, people you would like to have your customers. Customizable on who we're talking to. And we're engaging with those audience members over time through what are de facto short surveys. And what we're doing is we're getting an understanding of how opinions and behavior are changing over time. And that can be measuring the effects of planned events. So, hey, we're running a new marketing campaign, we're bringing a new product to market. We want to understand is what we're doing effective, or it can be unplanned events. So, big news stories, changes in the landscape, where we can understand the how much of an effect this event is having on either your bottom line, your audience, what have you. So at the end of the day, we're creating very large data sets, longitudinal data sets, and we get to geek out over the data and the numbers and tell our clients what's happening. And ultimately, if we're doing our job correctly, then our clients are always making decisions based on an understanding of what's happening right now, not what happened a month ago, 2 months ago, but hey, we're making a decision here. What's our landscape look like? Does this decision still make sense? If the answer is yes, let's move forward. If no, let's rethink before we start heading in a bad direction.
Awesome. So actionable data from your audience, whatever that group of people is, their voice, their sentiment, their opinions, and you're helping your clients get to that and understand the insights and take action. That's amazing. All right, cool. So now we're going to get into the fun part of the show where we understand some of the things that you're learning in your seven-figure journey and some of the things that you might be tripping up on or could benefit from a little help on. And in the hopes, in covering both of these things, we're hoping to help as many business owners as we can. So let's jump into it, Stefan. On the the learning side or the experience side of things, what would you like to share today in your journey that might be useful to other business owners?
Yeah, I mean, so first I'll say, it's a lonely place to be as a business owner, right? And it's always tough because it's oftentimes tough to find that community in order to like just sort of talk to people, throw ideas out, complain. Talk about talk about what's bothering you this week, and there's that one of those memes out there where it's the day a day in the life of a founder, where you're going from you're curled up in the corner crying to like pure elation and rinse and repeat. So it's a crazy world that's certainly not for everyone, and I think I'm still you know I'm making it up as I go along.
We're
and
all making it
so
up as
we're
we go along. Yes.
so it is tough out there, but I think I you know not that I'm the first one to give this advice, right? But it's like, look, I think the big one is like, look, we're all going to make mistakes, right? Like no one is perfect. we don't have there's not a perfect map out there that just no, this is how you do it, right?
Yeah.
And so the big thing is, hopefully we can learn from as many mistakes as humanly possible, and and then also and try not to repeat those mistakes again. Been guilty of doing that, but oh, this time it's going to work. But oftentimes if it didn't work the first time, it doesn't work the second time either. But and then I think there's also the if you're when you're bootstrapping, you're starting out, it's early, there's different sets of problems, and then as you sort of move through, hopefully your success as you're growing, there's there's new challenges and new problems, and some of the old ones go away, a lot of them kind of continue, get a little magnified, and and that can be both challenges. Growth, can be a challenge both just I'll call it from day to day. How do you deal with clients? How do you scale this up to, oh my God, like I went from three of us sitting around a conference table and you know not many HR problems when there's three people sitting around, but now we have 15 people, and now we're also dealing with HR problems, and this is new, and how do I deal with this? I've never dealt with this before. So there's just a lot of moving parts, and it just sort of feels oftentimes like you're just trying to let me just try to keep my head above water for at least a couple hours today before the next problem comes along.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're here. Is you talked about how lonely it can feel. Yeah, like nobody really gets you unless they're also a business owner dealing with some of these things. So that I think that's the value, and what you shared about learning from our mistakes, and how simpler it was when we were fewer, and then it starts to get more complicated, and adding more people creates new dynamics and new conversations that maybe you never thought you'd be having about whatever human resource kind of issue. Anyway, so all those things start to change as you think about your specific journey and the lessons you've been learning. um, I think I'd love to hear you brought up a couple before we hit record. I'd love to hear you talk about your experience with money before and after, like before when things were a little tighter versus after when it's like, oh, we actually have some cash flow now. And I thought that was a great issue. Let's, if you don't mind jumping in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, obviously generalizing here and or talking about my own experience, which is, everyone's experience is slightly different, right? So I'll say, people can take this, hear this, and sort of be like, all right, this is my version of that story. But, when you're starting out bootstrapping, there's not much, if any, positive cash flow. You're very hypersensitive about every dollar spent, right? It's like, I mean, down to like, hey, can I take the team out for a couple drinks after work today, or is that a bad idea to like pop that on the credit card? So you just every you're very hyper aware of where the dollars are going, and really thinking through. It's like, okay, if I pay this invoice today, am I going to have enough cash 3 weeks from now for the next payroll, or again, what have you in your own business? But and then as the business starts to grow, and hopefully you're becoming more cash positive, now you start running into, again, hopefully, where there's like, hey, you look at that, you log into your bank account and you're like, well, that looks pretty good. That's a nice, that where I'm like, I'm feeling pretty good about myself here. And, so I think what we had talked about, and sort of, if I'm throwing out advice to other business owners there, is that sort of don't get caught into the trap of just feeling good about that number and that positive cash flow, and making what are ultimately not maybe the best business decisions, right? So it's sort of like, it's, you want to keep that vigilance on the spend, right? And then it's like, and thinking through like, hey, is this a good idea for the company? Is this going to get me more clients? Is this going to sell more product? Again, going to be different for every single business, versus, I don't need this really nice new dress, but I walked into the store and I got a bunch of cash in my pocket, so I'm buying the dress even though I don't have anywhere to wear it or anything. It's just going to make me feel good that's sitting in my closet. Try to stay away from those purchases, and still always stick with that core idea of, is this something I need to do for my business, should be doing for my business? Is this going to get me more clients, or is this going to, you know improve our profit margin on whatever it is we're selling.
Yeah, I like that list that you just rattled off. It's like, is it going to help in one of these ways? If so, then maybe that spend is worth doing. I want to dig in a little bit, maybe even emotionally, and remember what it's like to be in that place of scrutinizing where every penny goes, because we've all been there, right? I know when things get a little lean in my business, the first thing I look at in the morning is the bank account. Like, where are we at in the
Yeah,
bank account, right? It's like a daily habit. When things are tight, that's what I do. And I know, and thankfully, I haven't been in that place since COVID. But when COVID hit and things got uncertain, and some of our customers, some of our members peeled off for a time, it was like, oh wow, I better, do we have enough money? Do we have enough money? And so you spend in a much different place when that's the mentality you're coming from. Um, Again, thankfully, I haven't been in that spot for a while, but I think what you're saying is we don't want, like, here's what I'd like to add to what you said. We don't want the nervous, anxious energy of those tight times to come with us in the we don't have to use the word abundance, but like there's more. We can have an investment mindset versus the panic stricken, I better not spend mindset. That's a different place to come from. But we don't want to get so loose in our spending that we start jeopardizing the mission, right? We start jeopardizing what we're trying to accomplish because we're being a little undisciplined in how we spend. Am I
right.
capturing that well?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think even like, if you just taking it away from business and just even thinking in life, right? Like if you think back to when you were in like your 20s, maybe you had your first job coming out of college, you felt rich because
Yeah,
like, I was like, oh, look at this first paycheck I got. How awesome is this, right? And, you buy 3 rounds of drinks for your buddies at the bar. Um, I'm sure you had a good time. Again, like we've all been there, but it's sort of, it's like if you keep doing that every night, that paycheck's going away real quick, right?
yeah,
And then, looking back, it's like, were some of those nights worth it? Absolutely. 100%, right? Memories I'm never going to forget. Did you need to do it every night? Absolutely not. So, again, and especially when you're 20, you're not thinking through that when you're going out, for an evening in those fashion. But like from the business perspective, it's sort of like, even if you look back at some of the things you spent, maybe some larger ticket items like in the past, even in those earlier stages, right? I'm sure you can come up with a list of like good spend. I'm glad would do it again. Didn't need to do that, right? And so you want to always try to, as much as humanly possible, like kind of just go through that process of like, am I going to be looking back at this as a good spend, or is this, going to be one of those like probably shouldn't have done it uh, type of decisions?
yeah. And I think what the larger issue you're bringing up here is that we all have a finite number of resources, and I'm sure there's some person out there saying, ready to disagree with me and say, well, you can always go find more resources, and I get that, but let's assume we're dealing with the zero sum game. We just have this pie. How are we going to utilize the scarce resources we have for the most impact in our business? And if we aren't taking a strategic view on that spend, we could be missing opportunity to really move the business forward because we feel like more of an impulse purchase. I want to do this thing right now, or even if it's not an impulse, it could be well thought out, like well planned, something I've always wanted to do, but it doesn't really fit with what we're trying to do with the business. And so we just got to be careful with that and not get too off track when we actually come into some money. So
Right.
I love
And
that.
I, and I, yeah, and I think like, I mean, maybe I'm just totally speaking for myself personally here, but I think part of the trap is equating money with intelligence, right? So it's like, hey, I boosted this from bootstrap and scrappy to positive cash flow with money I can, more money I can invest in the company. Like I didn't become smarter over the last 12 months, right? Like I've learned some lessons, we've tested some things out, we've figured out some things that work, some things that don't work. But I, as an individual, didn't all of a sudden, my business IQ did not just go up by like 30 points, right? So don't. don't think of yourself as, oh well, I'm just smarter and look how great this is, so I'm now anything I think of is going to be gold. Like, probably not the case.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Let's keep a little humility involved here. All right, so Stefan, that was great to talk about. Let's shift gears from lessons that you've learned along the way to now things that you're dealing with still today, right now, a challenge that you might be wrestling with that others could benefit from.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is totally in the category of, like, every company's different, and people who are building a widget to sell the widget is it's going to be different than, at the end of the day, we're more, we're providing a consulting service, right, which is a different kind of animal. So everyone's going to have their own thing, and I think some of the classics out there are that as you're growing, the having to, like, sort of give things away, and get your processes in place, and all those kind of, like, all those things are 100% true. And I think, for me personally, right, when we're looking at the way that we're set up is, we have three sort of unique departments, divisions, sort of like pieces of our service, or foundations to our service. And then, and everyone's busy, right? So if we have four of us, like, the leads for each of the three, myself, and now we're growing, right? And everyone has too much work to do, more on their plate than they can handle in, 40 hours a week. Again, the we know none of that's true, especially for the owner. But now it's like, okay, we have the money to hire one more person. Who gets the person, right? And so now, and like, everyone has probably a good argument for why they need the person. And sort of trying to work through you know how do I pick my favorite kid in this circumstance, and who gets the last piece of cake.
Yeah, no, that's a great issue, especially if you have different leaders, if you will, or functional leaders, department heads, and they're all important to you, and they're all necessary to providing the service that you provide to your clients, or else they wouldn't exist, right? So these are essential pieces to providing the service, and you have enough resource to add somewhere, but and everybody could use the help. Who gets that hire? It's a great issue. Let's dig in on what it means to you as the business owner first. Like, what I mean by that is what what happens for you if in trying to make this decision. Like like why is this a big deal to you? Why not just
Right.
roll the dice, pick one, and go?
I mean, I get ultimately that's probably where you're going to end up, right? But you have a team, right? And then, presumably, so if I'm picking, hey, you get the help, right? Now, you're saying to the other two indirectly, you don't get the help. Like, you get to keep doing what you're doing, and now this person is going to get the help, which means they're going to have more time to do arguably their actual job, and sort of overseeing that department, right? And so now it's not just the positive outcome for the one person, but you're also dealing with the negative for the other two. And we're a team, and dealing with the, I don't know if disappointment's the right word, but certainly you're kind of letting two people down by picking the one person who gets the help.
Okay, yeah. So two people might be looking at you saying, "What gives, Stefan? Like, what?
Right.
Don't you see that I need some help?" Or they might feel under supported or whatever. And yes, the one's going to feel super grateful, probably, right? And like, awesome, this is just what we needed, and here are the reasons why it makes sense to the business. And anyway, they're going to be excited. They're going to feel great towards you, and the other two might feel a little deflated unless they really see with the company lens, no, that was the right spot, right? So,
Right.
but yeah, those are some of the real people issues, the real emotions that go into this situation. Okay, well let's talk about ways to think about this that might be helpful. I hope they're helpful to you and others. You mentioned your business being different than others, but this issue of only so many resources. We got to make decisions sometimes about where those resources go, which necessarily means other places don't get them. That issue is widespread. It's so common in any kind of business, different business models. This is just what happens when you don't have, unless you go raise capital and you've got enough money to,
Right.
right, spread it around. But when you're bootstrapped, when you're a practical founder, as my friend Greg Head likes to call it, um, then you don't have excess funds to invest across multiple areas, and so you got to be very choiceful. Okay, so let's talk about some assumptions that went into your. I like the situation you set up, but there's a big assumption. So the assumption being that there's, like, we're going to hire a full-time person into one of the roles, and so I wonder, is there a way to, maybe, and I'm not saying you should make business decisions this way, but let's say that you wanted to invest a little bit in each one instead of all in one and none in the others, right? There was like a little bit of a zero sum approach to that, which is like, you get and you two don't. Whereas I think in our world now, there are ways to get contractor help or VA help that might be lower cost that you could spread out among the three. Um, Technically, that's an idea that you could consider. Now, that discounts the importance of being very strategic and being clear about where to put your resources for the biggest return or the biggest benefit to the business. So I'd like to stick with the idea that only one person, right, only one department can get the help, and which one do you decide? Let me ask you this, Stefan. Do you guys, as a team, do you get are you um, in the habit of doing like annual, quarterly planning? Do you come together to get out of the day to day and think more strategic as a team?
Uh, of course we do all the time. Not as much
Okay.
as we should, right? I think I mean, my sense is I think we're pretty good at it. Probably not great at it. I mean, definitely thinking through like what's the next year going to look like. Um, and it's a great question and making me think about. Oh, I mean, it's like, look, yes, we should be doing it more, but then we also have the challenge of like, well, we barely can hold it together and get the work done that needs to get done,
Yeah,
let alone spare time to like have the bigger thought thinking
that's right.
going
Yeah,
on. Yeah,
the fire's raging right now. We got to do stuff right now.
right.
Yeah, and that pressure is real, and everybody listening to this is feeling that. It's like there's some level of urgent thing happening in my business day in and day out that pulls me in, and even if it doesn't feel urgent, there's just a mountain of work that I got to get through, and so taking time to think about the future by myself, let alone with my team, feels like a luxury that I don't have. And so I'm not calling this, I'm not pointing a finger at you, Stefan. I'm talking to business owners everywhere who deal with the same challenge. So even if you do it some, I heard a little bit of question in your response of like, yeah, maybe there's a little bit more clarity we could get about the future. And the only point I want to make here is the more clear we are about the what I call a destination oriented mission. So some big companies will say, "Oh, we have a mission statement to like save the planet and I don't know, make people happy," and like these big, broad statements, which are inspiring, but they're not always helpful in getting clear about how we're going to allocate resources, scarce resources. We don't have unlimited resources, so we got to get really clear about here's the destination we're going to together over the next 3 years, let's call it, right? I like a 3 year mission. So by the end of 2027, here's the progress we will have made. Here's the mountain we will have summited. Here's the thing we will have accomplished together. So if you have a clearly stated objective, a destination oriented mission, now we can say, all right, if we're going there, then here's how I'm going to utilize our money. Here's how we're going to spend our management time and attention. Here's how we're going to, allocate the team. Like everything comes into clearer picture when we know exactly where we're going together. So hard to do, easy to talk about, hard to do. But from a practical standpoint, if you if you had I don't know, let's say you're driving down the freeway, you're in the DC area, plenty of freeways, and you're driving down the road and you have a full schedule. Like it is packed that day, and you're trying to go to everything that happens, but you have a flat tire. Do you stop and deal with the flat tire, or do you get to your thing? Well, some business owners may be like, no, I just left it there and I got an Uber and I had to get to the meeting. Okay. But most of us stop and deal with the flat tire. But you didn't have that 20 or 30 minutes or that hour, or however long it took you. You didn't have it in your schedule. And yet you took the time, you made the space, you did it. Similar thing happens with like a family emergency. Oh, I drop everything when I get this call from my wife, right? It's like, oh, that's important. And we don't have to get into the specifics of that. We all have situations that come to mind. It's like, no, everything else can wait. I'm going to go deal with this thing. And so I wonder why it is that urgent things that come up, unplanned things that come up that are urgent, get our attention when these, more important things that are more future oriented tend to get set aside because of the other day-to-day things. So anyway, I've talked a lot. Stefan, why don't you help me understand for you guys, like how much future clarity do you have as a team, and how regularly are you making time to check in on it?
Yeah, so I would say I think we have good fuzzy long-term thinking on like the we have the generic hey, this is where we'd kind of like to be, right? Not necessarily a solid roadmap of how to get there. um, I'm totally making excuses here, but since we're bringing something new to the market and trying to change dynamics, there's a at least a feeling of, and certainly I think the fact of like less certainty of how this lands in different places, right? So
Okay.
it's a little tougher to predict. But and now that we're having this conversation, think it right. So I can definitively tell like we had a bunch of in-depth conversations towards the end of last year talking about what 2024 is going to look like. What are we going to allocate different funding if this X, Y, and Z comes in, right? And then we as a team have the senior leadership. We have a weekly hour set aside for discussions. Um, and now this is where my story starts heading south, because I can also now tell you that those discussions should be more about longer term planning, but always just end up going into like, what's the damn fire we have to put out right
Yeah.
now? How are we going to deal
Yeah.
with this?
And Stefan, like there's zero shame in this conversation, by the way. This is and a lot of accolades for being open to talk about it. There's a lot of people experiencing the same thing. They're just not having this conversation with me. So same thing's going on. I've seen it over and over again. And by the way, the weekly management team time that you have, that's an appropriate cadence for like weekly dashboard review, operational metrics, making adjustments in our like what we're doing to get the results we have to have. Not the best place for your strategic planning, your long-term thinking necessarily, because we have like the important day-to-day things going on, and that's what we should be checking in on weekly. But I would advocate for a monthly leadership meeting, right? A monthly view of how are we doing towards the bigger picture progress while we're delivering today's results, because that's the balancing act, right? Deliver today's thing, respond to all the craziness now, while we break out sufficient time to make sure that we're not taking our eye off the longer term game. We've got to build for the future, and we got to deliver today's results. And so a good meeting rhythm will help you manage that little balancing act. And a weekly meeting should be more operational. Very
Hmm.
rarely would I see the strategic stuff. So makes perfect sense to me. The annual would be all strategic, right? Quarterly, I would hope to be mostly strategic on that. Maybe a few key operational things would bubble up there, but monthly, you get a little. Monthly is the bridge for me that a lot of businesses skip. Monthly is like half operational, like the big stuff that's messing up our operations that we don't have time to cover in the weekly meeting. Let's raise that and problem solve together as a team for half of that monthly, and the other half is how well are we tracking on our quarterly and annual progress, right?
Right.
So The bigger picture, set the line in the sand that says by the end of 2026 or 27, whatever your mission destination is, by that point, we will have accomplished this. And then let's have an annual plan that's on our way to that longer term thing, and then a quarterly supporting plan, and then we know what the monthly and weekly operational goals, and we talk about that stuff all the time. So anyway, I would advocate for a clearer mission, better, I guess, discipline, for lack of a better term, or commitment. Let's use the word commitment to annual, quarterly, monthly meeting rhythm stuff that allows us to stay focused on the longer term, because the short term stuff will never let you ignore it, right? Like it's going to
Right.
be there. So
Yeah.
anyway, if you do that with your team, then usually it's not you picking favorites and saying, and that's not the premise. You didn't set it up that way, but why did that person get the resource and not the other two? Hopefully, if the team's in this together, we're all looking at that saying, that's the place we need to put that first, right? Like
Right.
that's the beauty of bringing them along into that co-created future, rather than you sort of picking and hoping that everybody gets along afterwards. So we're out of our time on this. I hope that was helpful a little bit to you. It is a common problem that a lot of people deal with.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's like business therapy, right? I think it's sort of I think, and I'm sure I would get hate mail from psychiatrists or psychologists for saying this, right? But I think a lot of that is just you're just they're telling you what you already know, but you're just like someone else just kind of needs to say it for you to be like,
Yes.
yeah, like I do. That's right.
Yeah, the value in this exchange is that you paused from all the day-to-day madness. You opened up about something that lots of us just like deal with. And it wasn't revelatory. Like you said, I didn't say something new to you, but it's a reinforcement of something like, oh yeah, we should be doing that. And that's the value of it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for being willing, by the way, to open up, because it really does help a lot of people go, that's Stefan's singing my song. Like this is exactly what I go through. And it's not like you don't know any better. That's not the case. I mean, once in a while, there might be a practice shared, or here's an example that helps you move faster, but it's not a new idea. It's just a reminder that when we get sucked into the day to day, we lose sight of a bigger picture, and the longer we stay in day-to-day mode, the more perpetual we basically start a treadmill thing that keeps us from progressing as a business, because we're not doing the business building work while we're running the day-to-day. So that happens to lots of people.
Yeah.
So Stefan, thanks again for opening up with that. It's super helpful.
Absolutely.
All right, so Stefan, if people want to learn more about Trendency, connect with you on social, how would they do that?
So website is trendency.com. So it's spelled as a sound, so TREND. Now I just now I just said it wrong.
No, you
But
didn't.
so TRENDENCY.com. And then like LinkedIn, Stefan Hankin. I'm the only Stefan Hankin on LinkedIn, STEFAN. So I got that going for me, and always love connecting with people. Always happy to chat with folks. And for business owners sitting out there, again, the creating a community is hugely important, and get just to have conversations and be able to complain to someone that isn't your spouse, your neighborhood friend, your employees. Sometimes it's helpful to just be able to be like, I just need to get this off my chest in a way that's not going to come back and bite me.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly why we created this podcast. And actually, we have a community. There's a private Facebook group that's about seven-figure business owners, leadership coaching. Elite Entrepreneurs is our business name, but we're trying to build places where people can have these conversations with other people who get what they're going through, who have felt that way to the business, and who are willing to be open and share like you just did. So thank you, Stefan. For everybody listening, please share, like, subscribe, rate, do all those things to help this episode and all the other ones get in front of as many seven-figure business owners as possible as we're all trying to figure out this seven-figure journey together. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast.